Welcome to Stab the Dragon Productions for episode number 195. It is Friday, January 17th, 2025, here in Fort Worth, Texas. It is 61 degrees. And tonight, we'll continue our short series on Canadian whiskies by examining Canadian Club 1858, original blended Canadian whiskey. Previously in this series, we have studied Seagram's VO and Crown Royal Fine Deluxe. My goal here is to prepare to do a Canadian whiskey tasting locally, which may or may not happen. So just the facts. This Canadian whiskey was established in 1858 in Detroit, Michigan, by an American named Hiram Walker. Maybe a great uncle of mine. I don't know. Great uncle, something. There might be a family connection there. And it's now a part of the Jim Beam brands. That's why I got my Jim Beam sign up there. But all this is owned by Suntory, a Japanese company. This is a Canadian blended whiskey with no age statement, but the youngest whiskey allowed in here by Canadian law is 3 years. And I've seen statements that say what's in here is much older. I imagine it's got some 3-year-old whiskey, but a lot of it could be older. This is 80 proof, and this bottle cost me just over $9, 750 milliliter bottle, in December of 2024. It is distilled in Windsor, Ontario, just across the river from Detroit. Tasting notes. It was moderately sweet, but more oaky, which is what I liked. There's hints of maple syrup in here, tobacco, leather, some corn, some spiciness from the rye. But these are all hints. At 80 proof, it's a little bit too faint, and it leaves you wanting more. So my score for this whiskey is an 80. My letter grade for drinkability really is an A-. I mean, I could drink this every day. That's fine. My recommendation, this whiskey is a great value whiskey, and it's priced like a bottom shelfer, but it has a very good taste. So the taste is it's way up here compared with the price and where you might find it on the shelf. So I would gladly accept a drink of this whiskey anytime, and if somebody offered me a bottle and I currently didn't have one or had room in my shelf space, I would absolutely and gladly take the bottle. So this is a good daily sipper for somebody like me. I think this whiskey, along with most other Canadian whiskeys, gets a lot of undeserved disrespect these days. So if you're looking at getting into whiskey for the first time, I think Canadian Club 1858 is a good solid whiskey to start your whiskey journey with. Now, details. And I'm going to enjoy a pour. Cheers. So details. History. Hiram Walker was born in 1816 in Massachusetts. Moved to Detroit in 1838, where he worked as a grocer. Now, if you have watched any of my videos on blended Scotch, you know that grocers in Scotland started the modern whiskey business in the 19th century. As a grocer, he began distilling his own vinegar, and that led to distilling whiskey. But there was a problem in Detroit. They had, in the Detroit area, they already had like prohibition, and this is in the 1850s. So different locales had different laws and regulations about whiskey, and Detroit was dry. Now, this guy was also a grain merchant, distributing grain to various flour mills. So he purchased property across the Detroit River in Windsor, Ontario, along the railroad, built a steam-powered flour mill and distillery, which began making whiskey in 1858. Now, and he'd been making whiskey in Detroit illegally for a couple of years before that. But notice his his proximity to two significant modes of transportation. He's on the Detroit River, the Great Lakes are connected, and the railroad. So and Windsor is like the southernmost city in Canada. And it, you know how it kind of juts into, actually Detroit's north of Windsor. So Walker, in fact, when his distillery got going and was very prosperous, he really built a model city for his employees who worked at the mill and the distillery. He called it Walkerville, and it was its own separate little town until the 1930s. Walker's whiskey became very popular across Canada, spread into America, where he cleverly marketed it to exclusive clubs. You know, the top hotels, the top bars, clubs. And then it was marketed as a 5-year-old barrel-aged premium whiskey. And so it acquired the name club whiskey because it was found in clubs. The whiskey became so popular that American bourbon distillers actually complained to Congress, which then passed a bill requiring foreign whiskey that's imported into the country to label their whiskey with the country of origin. Well, that makes sense, actually. And that didn't hurt the sales of his whiskey at all. It's like, now, okay, this is Canadian club whiskey, and the name stuck. So that's where, you know, Congress gets involved, and that contributed to the naming of this whiskey. There you go. Walker's whiskey became increasingly popular, and at his death in 1899, the distillery passed to his sons. And with the passing of the 18th Amendment and the beginning of Prohibition in January of 1920, Canadian Club engaged in really a significant amount of smuggling or bootlegging, with Al Capone being one of their biggest customers. So that's an interesting twist on their history. Through the years, Canadian Club has received not one, not two, not three, but 5 royal warrants by England's kings and queens, starting with Queen Victoria and going all the way through to Queen Elizabeth II. They are the only distiller in North America to receive a royal warrant, and you can see the seal on the bottle. I don't know if you can see it, but it's right there. There you go. So, why Crown Royal doesn't have a royal warrant, I don't know. In 1952, all the lights in Times Square in New York City were turned off so that the Canadian Club neon sign could be lit up and displayed. Stayed there for 21 years. In the 1961 James Bond movie, Dr. No, Agent 007 drank Canadian Club. Today, Canadian Club is still very popular, still on some of the top 20 lists of best-selling whiskeys in America. In the last few years, it has seemingly declined, so that, 5 years ago or so, it would be like number 15 on the list. And these days, it's maybe number 20 if it's on there at all. So its popularity has declined through the years. And we've seen that with Seagram's VO. Seagram's VO used to be extremely popular in America, and now it's not on the top 20 lists at all. And so this one's just barely there. So I'm not sure why these whiskeys decline like that, just the changing tastes of America. In some, Canadian Club used to be, again, very popular, but now it's while it's ubiquitous, it's in liquor stores, it's in bars, it's kind of been surpassed and almost forgotten. So for history, I'm going to give it 5 out of 5 points. Bottle, label, and marketing. This bottle is very simple, but I like the look. I think it's classy. I like the smoky glass here. This is to me, it's a smoky brown colored glass. And the label is simple yet bold and elegant all at the same time. So I like the look of the bottle. It does have a screw-on plastic cap there. I'm going to go ahead and pour some. I'm going to make a little cocktail here. There you go. So for bottle, label, and marketing, I've not seen any marketing for this. I've not seen any advertisements for this. But in years past, they did some campaigns called Hide a Case, where they hide a case of their whiskey somewhere in the world, and then you can go search for it and win various prizes and stuff. And so some of the places they have hidden these include pretty dramatic stuff, like Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa. Really? Mount St. Helens in Washington? Well, what used to be Mount St. Helens. Death Valley, California. These wild campaigns were seen in the 1960s and another one in the 70s, stretching into the early 80s. Recently, this whiskey has been on the Mad Men TV show as one of the main characters' favorite whiskey. So, but I think that TV show points back to the 60s. So again, it's this whiskey is almost anachronistic because it's been great in times past, but not so great now. But for bottle, label, and marketing, 4 out of 5 points. Composition. As a blend, we don't know exactly, the mash bill in here. That'd be almost, I don't know how many whiskeys go into this one either. But again, everything is the minimum 3 years old, but I think most of this is older. I've read that the base whiskey is corn, but the flavoring whiskeys are rye, malted barley. The unusual thing about Canadian Club is that in comparison with other Canadian whiskeys, they do their blending before aging. Most other Canadian whiskeys, they age them separately and then blend them and bottle. But here, they blend, age all together, and then bottle. So Canadian Club, is a little bit different there. Now, one of the things about the composition also historically is that Hiram Walker and his club whiskey it was stressed that, hey, this is barrel aged, and he's given credit with originating barrel aging whiskey. But the bourbon guys in Kentucky had been doing that way before Hiram Walker comes around. So I'm not real sure what this historical point is. Maybe he just made it popular. Maybe it was his advertising point. Maybe he aged things longer, because I know there was a while there in the 1800s when he was advertising that it was, aged for 5 years. So that's longer. And maybe it's in Canada. They didn't age things in barrels for very long. I'm not sure. But he was given credit with barrel aging. So there you go. Composition, 9 out of 15 points. Visual appearance, this is a pretty light whiskey, so I'm going to say a 2. 2 on my 5-point scale for visual appearance. The nose, it's faint, but I do actually smell something, so that's unusual. My nose is horrible. It doesn't work. I'm thinking maple syrup, corn, spices. Yeah, I'm actually, I'm getting something, which is better than nothing. So 8 out of 10 points for a nose. And most bourbons I can't smell at all. Sometimes with the rye I can smell things, and some scotches I can smell, but Canadian whiskey, imagine that. I actually smell that. That's an 8. Tasting. this is a very pleasant whiskey. It tamps down on the sweetness. It's still sweet, but what I'm getting a lot of is oakiness, the wood, and I really like that. That's why when it comes to bourbon, I like Texas bourbons that have that Texas funk that it gets from the wood. I like high rye bourbons that tamp down on the sweetness, and so I'm getting that with Canadian Club. You know, the high rye content and the mash bill, the wood. I'm liking that. Uh, leather and tobacco notes come through as well. That's what the oak can sometimes do. The maple flavor is there. Caramel, maple syrup, corn, baking spices. All of these flavors are nice, but faint due to it being only 80 proof. So, you know, that's the sad thing here is that you get hints of these flavors, but they're, you know, it's like a promise of something better, and the better never shows up. So there's nothing unpleasant here at all. It's good, it's tasty. So 21 points for taste. Mouthfeel, burn, and finish. The mouthfeel is just a little bit thin because of that 80 proof. Now it's not thin to the point of distraction. There is a slight burn, which is pleasant, but it's a smooth whiskey. But the burn reminds you that, hey, this is a whiskey. Finish is medium, and you get some of those oaky flavors. The sweet maple syrup thing lingers a little bit. The tobacco leather is hanging in there some. A little bit of mouth tingles stay in there. So 11 out of 15 for the mouthfeel, burn, and finish. Neat or mixer? Well, I like mine neat 99% of the time, it seems. That is just an easy sipper. But I have now made a cocktail with Canadian Club and Diet Coke. There you go. So here we go. Let's see what this does. And that's very pleasant. Absolutely. So let's go with 5 out of 5 for the neat or mixer. Price, value, and availability. Goody Goody has this in Fort Worth at $10.99. Specs for $10.49. Total Wine $12.99, but that was for a liter. And the Specs was labeled 6 year. I mean, the bottle they were showing clearly had an age stamp on there. It said 6 year. So I've never seen that. I don't know. I've never seen the 1858 with an age stamp, but the picture on the Specs website had that. So Total Wine, you know, they only had the liter and 1.75, so they didn't advertise a 750. But what you see from those prices is that this is a very good price, and for the quality of the drink, I'm just, you know, this is a 10 for price, value, and availability. And I think it's ubiquitous. I think it's going to be in just about every liquor store everywhere. Bonus points, 5 out of 5. Bonus points because I like the history behind it. I like the bottle and label. I like the taste, the flavor that I'm getting. I like the price, value, and availability. There's just a really, there's a lot to like about Canadian Club. And so I think the disrespect that Canadian whiskeys receive in the whiskey community is unwarranted. Now rule number one is always, hey, your favorite whiskey is what you like, drinking it the way you like it. Absolutely. But I think, you know, some of the criticism that is tossed around is sometimes harsh. Is this a beginner whiskey? It is, but I'm no beginner and I still like it. So my total score, 80, my letter grade for drinkability, A minus, and recommendation, again, for the price, this is a very good buy. Again, I would gladly accept a drink of this anytime. And if somebody offers me a bottle and I didn't have one already, I had shelf space, absolutely take it. So, and I would say that this is the first bottle of 1858 that I've tried. I've tried 2 other bottlings of Canadian Club, their rye and their 9-year-old version, and I really liked both of those. They're very good, so I recommend it. In conclusion, now we have tried 3 Canadian whiskeys. We've got the Seagram's VO, we've got the Crown Royal Fine Deluxe, and now the Canadian Club. And I think I'm going to have to do some kind of a contest to see which one I like the most. So maybe we'll do a little tournament here in a while. All right, this is Stab the Dragon, out here.